For the last month, we've been looking at relationships over results. And today, we're going to really look at what's the research say about why we don't focus on relationships over results. Why do we oftentimes get right to the point, focusing oftentimes on statistics, data, and results, especially in the workplace? And it has a lot to do with our brains. And so for today's LEAP weekly webinar, we're going to talk about new research explains why we focus on results and oftentimes forget relationships. Now, it all starts up in our brain. And why we talk about what gets in the way is it was fun for the last month to talk about different ways to really focus on relationships, whether that's building rapport and some of the techniques behind it, or even a little bit about appreciation and some of the ways that we can really appreciate and acknowledge the people in our workplace, our staff, our employees, and our coworkers. But what we really want to know is what's going to get in the way of that. It's great to know all of those techniques, but what oftentimes does stop us from trying them out, from testing them, and then once we do test them, really implementing them and embodying them. And it's right up here. It's our brain. Our brain oftentimes gets in the way, but it really gets in the way because it's really just really powerful. And there are two main pieces of why it gets in the way. The first is our neuropaths, and the second is our resistance to change. So first and foremost, our neuropaths. That is essentially that our brain is so smart that it creates very connected bridges within our brain that help us get from point A to point B in our thought processes. And so when we've implemented a culture that focuses on results, a workplace, a society that's driven by statistics and data, we have created neuropaths within our brain that allow us to jump from point A to point B very quickly. It's why during the workday, you can jump from meeting to meeting and not even notice that you're just jumping right into the next one, getting ready for the next agenda, getting ready with your next set of research to bring to the group for a project. We actually create these pathways. And the reason our brain does it is so that we don't have such a problem getting from one thing to the next. But the fast pace of today's workplace has really driven us to build those neural pathways, which oftentimes jump from we're in this meeting to we need to get to this one, and we forget the fact that we're walking in the hallways with all of our coworkers, riding the elevator from one place to the next. And so we forget that little bit of relationship that can be built in between each because our brain is so good at jumping from thing to thing. Now, what also happens is that because our brain jumps so fast, we actually miss a part of our brain up here in the front called the prefrontal cortex that allows us to problem solve, to be creative, to be innovative, to build connection, appreciation, and so on. And the reason is because our neuropaths create such a quick thought process that we even forget that, sometimes we have to slow down to be creative, to think, to problem solve. And the second part was about resisting change. So as you go about implementing some techniques for relationships over results, what happens is our brain resists that change. It doesn't really like to have to break down those bridges that are there and build new neuropaths about the connections between relationships and building that new ritual where every meeting or every conversation you start out with this way to build a relationship. It doesn't really like that change. It doesn't like that breaking down of the bridge and building a new one. And so that's another thing that gets in our way that comes into the brain. We're going to hear things about this is a waste of time. We've got too much on our plate. We can't follow through with this, or the person's not going to care that we spent the time. So we'll hear all these little conversations in our head that are our brain telling us we don't want to break these bridges down and build new ones. So when it comes to what gets in the way, we need to put some things in place to be successful. And as I said, our brain is really powerful. It finds its way around these things. And so we have to be very, very intentional, authentic, genuine with ourselves, and then very determined to be able to implement these new pieces in place. And so the first one we're going to talk about is just starting with some reflection. And it is that for the last month, we've talked about relationships over results. And I've talked at you. I've told you, this is what we believe. Here's the power of relationships. Here's some of the science, the research, the statistics, and also here's some techniques. But what I haven't asked you to do is just sit down and reflect and write out your thoughts on relationships over results, especially in the workplace, in your teams, with your coworkers? What are your actual thoughts? I want you to take a little time, get out a little pad of paper and write down what are some of your thoughts on relationships over results, why you would focus on relationships over results, all of those things. I just want you to jot some thoughts down, because our goal is to start thinking about this on a deeper level and say, really, why would we personally take our time to focus on relationships over results? Why would we take the time to build rapport, to appreciate, to do these things? And so I want you to start by actually reflecting on it. And then I want you to move into labeling. And so that's about actually writing down as you've reflected, and you may say, oh, I really see the value in this. When I have a better relationship with a coworker, I see us getting along better in our teams. We're able to relate better. We collaborate better. We have conflict better. And when you see those things, I want you to write down and label what actually gets in the way of you doing that with other people. There's always those certain people at work that you get along with very well, but others not as well. So with labeling, it's what does get in the way. Is it that you feel too busy and rushed most of the day? That your to-do list seems to be too long? Or is it that you're running from meeting to meeting and you seem to not have time to take that deep breath to just check in on someone and see how they're doing, what they're up to, how their family is, what their hobbies are? So I want you to really, first, as I said, reflect. What are your thoughts? What do you believe about relationships over results and its impact in the workplace? And then label about what gets in the way of you living out that piece of you, being the contribution in the relationships. What gets in the way? So I want you to write those down, because there are pieces that get in our way. And sometimes it's just about understanding what it is, actually being truthful with ourselves, labeling it, getting it out there to say, hey, I'm realizing that I oftentimes say, this gets in the way. I'm too busy. I don't have time for that. And the third one is about prioritizing. If we sit and reflect and we write down that we believe that relationships in the workplace are extremely important and that they're what drive productivity, they're what drive good products, whatever it is, then we said, hey, these are the things that get in the way. I seem to always not have enough time. I seem to always be in a rush, so on and so forth. Now it's about prioritizing. It's about writing out the things that we have to do in the day and prioritizing, well, what would be most important? During my relationships over results piece during this month, I said, oftentimes, we actually have to purposefully schedule time for building relationship, for building rapport. The reason is because it's not oftentimes in our meetings, our everyday conversations, or even our schedules. And I shared with you about Studer, and it's group formed, but it was from a CEO who, when I talked to you guys about it, it was all about that this CEO would go into a hospital, and he had no experience in being a CEO of a hospital. He was actually a special education teacher. But what he understood about was the power of building relationships and being personable with people. And so he would go out in the hospital and talk to people and learn about what they needed, what their favorite parts about the hospital were. He'd learn about their personal lives. And what it did was it created a relationship, a higher connection that just skyrocketed employee satisfaction scores, patient satisfaction scores, and so on. And so when we look at that and prioritizing, that individual actually set out time in his calendar to walk around a hospital and talk to everyone that was there, from the volunteers to their highest paid doctors. And so it's about you taking the time to say, where am I prioritizing? Do I need to actually schedule some time? We said at the beginning of any meeting that we do, we always set the first few minutes to build relationship. No matter what that is, build ritual, relationship, whether that's for you, it's one of the, let's share one personal, one professional success. It could be something that ties into your mission, your vision, your core values, anything like that. But what you need to do is prioritize the time. Because if we're going to say that relationships over results matter, then we need to speak it, act it, and follow through with it. And so when it comes to actually implementing this, it's all about understanding that, yes, it's not going to be easy. It will be difficult, will not be easy, to completely change a culture from a results-driven culture to a relationship-driven culture. But it does take time, it takes steps, it takes a process, And when you actually follow through and say, okay, I'm understanding that, yes, the brain is going to get in the way. It's going to say, I have neuropaths that say data, statistics, results matter. And we've created that over time. Now we need to break away those bridges and build new bridges. And there are plenty of examples of cultures all over the world who show a really high relationship-driven culture that have wonderful results, but it's all focused in the relationships. And so you can look at those relationships in a multitude of ways. You have relationships within your company, with your coworkers, with your superiors, with your direct reports. And you also have the relationships with your other business partners, your suppliers, people who produce materials you need, and also your customers. So as you look at relationships over results, make sure that you remember that we need to value all those relationships equally. Oftentimes, if you talk to a salesperson, they understand that the relationship is extremely important. That it's not always about the results, about building deeper relationship, because those relationships thrive and allow you to produce more business. But then all of a sudden we turn around and we go to talk to our account manager or our office help, and immediately we forget the fact that the relationships matter, right? We talk to the client with relationship, but then we don't talk to our coworkers, no matter which level they are. So as we break apart those neural pathways, we need to make sure that we understand that it's a process. It's going to take everyone time to understand, oh my gosh, we're focusing on this. We're not forgetting relationships, we're focusing on them. And we're going to move away from only results driven. And you'll get people pushing back, you'll get all of that. But know that those are those bridges. They're breaking apart, and you have to build new ones on top that help you address, okay, we need to move from connection to bonding, to appreciation, to rapport, to gratitude, and all these things. We just need to move our ability to think to these different pathways. And it will take time for everyone. And remember, we don't like change. So as you go about looking at how do I really implement relationships over results within my workplace, within my team, we don't like change. It will take time. It is a process. But do understand that the research shows consistently that when you focus on relationships over your results, you're more profitable, more productive. Your culture is a place where people want to work, to grow, to build their career and become more fulfilled in their lives and with their contribution to the workplace. Thank you, and stay tuned for next month where we're going to talk a whole lot more on employee engagement. Thank you.